You don't remember learning to be serious. It just happened. One day you were a child, and the next day you were the one holding everything together, managing emotions that weren't yours, solving problems you didn't create, carrying weight that should have never been placed on shoulders that small. And no one stopped you. No one said, "You're too young for this." They just kept handing you more responsibility, more worry, more reasons to grow up faster than your mind was ready to. So you did. You became the reliable one, the mature one, the one everyone could count on. And somewhere in that process, you forgot how to play. This is the psychology of an adult who never lived their childhood. And if that's you, you already know. You didn't lose your childhood to some tragic event. You lost it to something quieter, to necessity, to survival, to the belief that being a child was a luxury you couldn't afford. And now, you're an adult. And everyone says you should be grateful for how responsible you are, how independent, how strong. But inside, there's a tiredness that sleep can't fix, a heaviness that success can't lift, and a small voice asking the question you're too afraid to say out loud: when do I get to rest? Let's start with what really happened, because childhood isn't just about age, it's about safety, about being held without having to hold yourself, about making mistakes without the world collapsing, about needing without being a burden. But you didn't get that. You got the opposite. Maybe your parents were overwhelmed. Maybe they were struggling. Maybe they were just emotionally absent. So without anyone saying it out loud, you learnt that your needs were secondary, that asking for help was weak, that the only way to be loved was to be useful. So you stopped asking, you stopped needing, you stopped being a child, and in your place grew someone older, someone capable, someone who looked fine from the outside while slowly suffocating on the inside. Psychologists call this parentification. It's when a child becomes the emotional or practical caregiver for others in the family. When you're not raised, you're recruited, not protected, but depended on, not allowed to be young, but expected to be wise. And the cruelest part, everyone praised you for it. They said you were mature for your age, so responsible, so helpful. But maturity is supposed to be earned through time and experience, not forced through fear and necessity. You weren't mature, you were traumatized, and you learned to call it strength. Here's what happens when you're forced to grow up too fast. Your brain skips developmental stages. It was supposed to move through slowly, stages where you learn trust, where you learn play, where you learn that the world can hold you without you having to hold the world. But you never got those stages. So your nervous system stayed in survival mode, always alert, always anticipating, always preparing for the next crisis. This is called hypervigilance, and it doesn't turn off just because you're safe now, because your body doesn't know you're safe. It only knows the feeling of being small and responsible for things you couldn't control. So even now, as an adult, you can't fully relax. You can't enjoy the moment without scanning for what could go wrong. You can't celebrate success without waiting for it to crumble. You can't rest without feeling guilty, because rest feels like negligence. This is what stolen childhood does. It turns your body into a prison guard that never clocks out. And the exhaustion? That's not laziness. That's decades of holding your breath, waiting for permission to finally let go. Let's talk about what you missed. Because it's not just about the memories you don't have. It's about the self you never became. You missed the part where you learn that mistakes are safe. That failure doesn't mean catastrophe. That being imperfect doesn't make you unlovable. You missed the part where you discover who you are outside of what people need you to be. Where you explore. Where you try things just because they're interesting, not because they're useful. You missed the part where you learn that emotions are temporary. That sadness doesn't last forever. That anger doesn't destroy everything that you can feel without having to fix. But you never learnt that. So now, as an adult, emotions feel dangerous. Mistakes feel fatal. Rest feels irresponsible. And fun feels like something you have to earn but never quite deserve. This is the cost of a childhood you never lived. You became competent, but you never became free. And here's where it shows up now. You struggle to play, to be spontaneous, to do something just because it brings you joy. When people invite you to parties, you calculate whether you have the energy, When someone suggests something fun, you think about the logistics. When you have free time, you feel guilty for not being productive, because productivity is the only language you know. It's how you earned love, how you proved your worth, how you survived. But life is not supposed to be a performance review. And relationships are not supposed to be transactions where you give until you're empty and hope someone notices. You also struggle with rest. You can't take a day off without feeling like you're failing. You can't watch TV without multitasking. You can't sit still without your mind creating a to-do list. Because rest, to you, feels like weakness, like you're letting someone down, like the moment you stop holding it together, everything will fall apart. But here's the truth. The world doesn't collapse when you rest. It collapsed when you were young, and you learned that the only way to survive was to hold it together yourself. And you're still doing it. Still holding, still managing, still carrying weight that was never yours to carry. Let's talk about relationships. Because when you never got to be a child, you don't know how to be vulnerable as an adult. You become the caretaker, the fixer, the one who always has it together. You give advice, solve problems, and carry emotional labour for everyone around you. But who takes care of you? No one. Because you never let them. Because needing feels like failing. Because asking for help feels like admitting you're not as strong as everyone thinks you are. So you stay in relationships where you overfunction, where you give more than you receive, where you're valued for what you do, not who you are. And deep down, you resent it. You resent that no one asks how you're really doing, that no one notices you're struggling, that no one sees past the mask you wear so well. But here's the painful part. They don't see it because you don't show it. You trained yourself so well to hide your needs that even the people who love you don't know you're drowning. This is called compulsive self-reliance. And it's not strength, it's armour. It's the belief that if you need someone and they let you down, it will destroy you the way it did when you were young. So you don't need anyone. And you call it independence. But it's not. It's isolation dressed up as strength. Now let's talk about the grief. Because this isn't just about what happened. It's about what you lost. The version of you that never got to exist. You lost the child who could laugh without worrying, who could dream without calculating, who could trust that someone else would catch them if they fell. That child is gone. Not because they died, but because they were never allowed to live. And no one acknowledges that loss, because how do you mourn something you never had? How do you grieve a childhood that wasn't taken in one violent moment, but slowly eroded by 1,000 small moments of having to be more than you were ready to be? This is called ambiguous loss, and it's one of the hardest forms of grief because there's no funeral, no closure, no validation, just you sitting with the quiet ache of knowing you were robbed of something essential, and the world telling you to be grateful you turned out okay. But okay is not the same as whole, and you know the difference. So what do you do now? First, you stop romanticising what happened. You stop saying, it made me stronger. You stop defending the people who put you in that position, because yes, you're strong, but you shouldn't have had to be. And strength that came from survival is not the same as strength that came from support. Second, you grieve. You let yourself feel the sadness of what you missed, the anger at what was taken, the unfairness of having to grow up before you were ready. You cry for the child who never got to be careless, who never got to be held, who never got to believe that someone else would figure it out. That grief is not weakness, it's the first step toward healing, because you can't reclaim what you refuse to mourn. Third, you give yourself permission to be young now. Not literally, but emotionally. You let yourself play. You do things that serve no purpose other than joy. You waste time. You make messes. You try things you're bad at just because they're fun. You learn to rest without guilt, to need without shame, to ask for help without feeling like a burden. This is called reparenting, and it's not about blaming your parents. It's about becoming the adult who can give your inner child what they never received. It's you going back and saying, well, you didn't deserve that. You were too young. And I'm going to make sure you finally get to be a kid, even if it's 20 years too late. Here's what you need to understand. You're not broken because you grew up too fast. You're adapted. Your nervous system learned to survive an environment where being a child was dangerous. But you're not in that environment anymore, and the strategies that saved you then are now suffocating you. Because you don't need to be hypervigilant anymore. You don't need to manage everyone's emotions. You don't need to prove your worth by being useful. You're allowed to just exist, to take up space without earning it, to be loved without performing. And no, it won't feel natural at first, because vulnerability feels like danger, rest feels like neglect, joy feels unearned, but that's the work. Teaching your body that safety is real, that you can let your guard down, that the world won't collapse if you stop holding it together. Carl Jung said, "The debt we owe to the play of imagination is incalculable." But you never got to play, so your imagination became a tool for survival, not exploration. It became the part of you that planned for worst-case scenarios, not dreamed of possibilities. And now, as an adult, you struggle to imagine a life where you're not constantly bracing for impact, but that life exists, and you deserve it. So here's what I want you to hear. You didn't get a childhood, and that's not fair. That's not okay. And it wasn't your fault, but you still have time, not to go back, but to finally move forward in a way that honours the child you were and the adult you're becoming. You're allowed to slow down, you're allowed to play, you're allowed to rest without earning it, you're allowed to need people without feeling like a burden, you're allowed to be soft, to be messy, to be imperfect, to be human, because you were never supposed to be the adult in the room when you were 7. You were supposed to be the child, and it's not too late to give yourself that now. Not by going backward, but by finally letting yourself feel what you never got to feel. Do what you never got to do. Be who you never got to be. You survived by growing up too fast. But you heal by learning to be young again, even if it's just for a moment, even if it's just in private, even if it scares you. You deserve softness, you deserve rest, you deserve a life where you're not always holding your breath. And the child inside you, the one who never got to play, they're still there, waiting for you to finally come back and say, "It's okay now. You're safe. You can rest. So rest. You've been strong long enough. It's time to finally let go."